Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with, as always, my special guest and co-host, John Barker from the 70th District. As you're watching this on the television, that's John on your far left. And John's 70th District, Abilene area, and a lot of other parts of this area that around us, Chapman and so forth. And we also have a special guest, Troy Waymaster from Bunker Hill area, 109th District.
Yes.
Representative and KU graduate.
KU graduate.
And I got a couple of farm kids here because John's a farmer rancher, and I know that Troy, you grew up on a farm at a very early age and started baling hay and so forth. Still involved in it.
And I'm still involved with the farming operation with my dad and my uncle.
Well, I appreciate it. And of course, those of you who know John Barker, he's a retired judge and also military. So John's got quite a background, and I appreciate the fact that on Friday afternoons he comes in and he always brings a special guest with him, and we're delighted to have you here, Troy.
Well, thank you for having me.
And so, John, update us. What's been going on this week in the legislature?
Oh, it's been a long week. Monday was the last day for non-exempt committees to kick their bills out or to pass them out to go to the floor of the House. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, we actually worked bills on the floor, went in early, worked all day. One day we worked 38, strike that was 12 bills. That was on Tuesday. And then kind of got bogged down on one bill, which was the reamortization of KPRS, which we talked about before, where the governor wanted to reamortize the debt, which would have taken it out another, well, it would have been out a total of 30 years, and it would have cost $4.4 billion. And to get to 238, we agreed to pay the 238 million, because that's our payment. And what was interesting is it was unanimous. Again, it happened last year, and it happened this year. Both parties agreed that that's not a good solution, so it was voted down. I'm sure at the disappointment of the governor. Then we, because it is turnaround, means that we had to get those bills out. If we did not get them out of the House, they die, unless they were blessed. So we did that. We ended up on Wednesday. Thursday was pro forma, which means members could go home. A lot of members had to stay and work on, and I stayed in Topeka to work on other things that's coming up the following week. And then today I've been in the Bob Bethel committee. Bob Bethel is a joint committee on CanCare or Medicaid. It's an oversight committee, and we had a number of people come in today to talk about the services that the state provides under Medicaid. So we did that till about 2 o'clock today, and then I headed here. So it's been an interesting week. I'm glad Troy is with us, because he is chairman of Appropriations. So he spends our money, our tax dollar.
Wisely, no doubt.
Wisely, yes, we try to control the spending.
And we've served together. I think we came in at the same time,
we did,
8 years
in 2013.
Ago. And Troy's running for the United States Congress.
Yes, I am.
And I'm going to wish you well there. I hope to see your name on the ballot at the primary, so that I can make a vote.
Well,
and that's
I appreciate that.
First district.
First district.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And but other than that, it's we go back on Wednesday of next week. It's turnaround, so we'll be the non-exempt committees will be working Senate bills. The exempt committees, of course, will just continue on as we normally do. But it's we're halfway done, folks, and hopefully we're halfway done. And if we get a budget out, we could all go home early.
That is correct. We just got to get the budget out.
John, when you go back, what's the hot button that's going to be going on when you go back?
Well, in my committee, I've got a couple of things. I've got the scheduled the sports book bill, which is betting on sports. The Senate passed a bill out on Wednesday. They debated it for 4.5, 5 hours. Long time. A number of amendments in my opinion, it was kind of slighted towards the casinos. Ours is probably more diverse. It goes out to convenience stores and allow them to do certain things. So we're going to schedule ours, I think, for the 10th or 11th of March. We'll probably try to work the bill. We'll do 2 days of hearing, work the bill after that, and then get it to the floor of the House. I plan on carrying it. I hope I don't have to stand on the floor of the House for 5 hours and debate it.
Yeah.
I'm getting too old for that. But if need be, I'll be there to do that. And there are several other bills that we're working on. Of course, we've done this smoking 21 bill. There's some indication that we'll got a couple of other alcohol bills that we'll try to get out. But, we're going to stay busy. Not as busy as appropriations. They're getting your budgets in.
Yeah, we're getting all the budgets reported into us.
Yeah.
Well, all right. We're going to cut away, take a break. When we come back, Troy, we're going to visit with you
Sounds
about
good.
what's going on with appropriations. We'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Troy Waymaster.
Thank you, Doug.
And on your far left, as you're watching it on the screen, is the co-host John Barker, 70th District. And Troy, I remember when you were on the show, I don't know, a year ago or maybe a little longer.
Yeah, might have been a little longer.
And you're from Bunker Hill.
Yes, I am.
Grew up in that Russell area.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated from
Russell
high school and then went on to KU.
Yes.
And John was just mentioning that you're running for a position in Congress.
Yes, with the seat opening up with Roger Marshall running for U.S. Senate, I decided to run for U.S. House.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Good luck with that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Troy, give us an update because, as John said, you're involved in appropriations, and that's where I'm just guessing. I've never sat in that spot, but I'm guessing what happens is there's a whole lot of people sending bills in to you to figure out where all the money comes from and get the money back out for appropriations.
That's part of it.
Okay.
Anytime that there is a bill that's been introduced that has any type of money aspect to it, which a lot of the bills do, more than likely it's going to be heard in the Appropriations Committee. We're going to have the hearings, we're going to work the bills, and then we'll pass those out of committee and then have those debated on the House floor. The other half of what we have to do is actually construct the state budget. And so we have 6 budget committees that started meeting right when we got back to session in January. And then about the first week in February, we had the first budget committee starting to report out the budgets for all the agencies and departments for the state of Kansas. We're about a little over halfway through that process. We'll be going until March 11th. We'll be continuing those discussions. Those discussions will actually be more lengthy because we hold the larger budgets for the end. We do the easier, smaller budgets at first, but now we're starting to get into the larger budgets where there's going to be a lot more thought and a lot more deliberation when we start discussing those budgets. We were just talking about the judicial budget. That's one of the budgets that we have to hear, and that'll be being reported out within the next couple of weeks. But we've also have had the Department of Ag, Department of Commerce, your large entities within the state government. We've already discussed some of those. We'll also have some bill hearings as well. One of those that has been somewhat controversial, but I think we have an amendment that is going to appease both parties, is right now within the Department of Commerce with the Kansas Corporate Commission. They have 2 well plugging funds for oil and gas wells across the state of Kansas. One of those funds is pre-1996, so these are your more aged, older gas wells or oil wells, and the other fund was post-1996, which has only been utilized once.
Right.
And the fund that needs to pay for all of those older wells, the ones drilled in the 1920s and 30s that have been abandoned and need to be plugged, there's not a lot of money left in that fund. So we have a bill that's going to merge the 2 funds together so they can utilize the post-1996 funds for the wells that were drilled.
To go back and cap?
Yes, go back and plug and cap those wells. The Sierra Club has come out against it because there's 3 bills in order to combine the funds. But like I said, I think we've gotten to a point where we have an amendment that's going to be encompassing not all, but some of the issues that they had raised. The other bill that we're going to be having a hearing on is the Healthcare Innovation Fund, which is going to be a fund that's going to be set up to help out rural hospitals and trying to decide what the planning aspects they need to be looking at. That was part of the House leadership's plan of Make Kansas Work. And so we'll be having that bill hearing. And then we'll be just having some others. I mean, as John mentioned earlier in the segment, we basically adjourned on Wednesday because Thursday was pro forma. And so any of those bills that were kept alive, or as the terminology in the legislature is blessed, 38 of them went to appropriations.
And then they'll be read back into other committees.
Yeah, and then they'll be dispersed back out to other committees. But everybody was making the comment on Wednesday, boy, I'm going to be busy because we're going to have all those bills in committee, but it was just a way of keeping those bills alive for the rest of the legislative session. Once we get all of the budget committees reporting out their respective budgets, then we start piecing together the budget back together. And it usually takes anywhere from 2 to 3 days of 1.5 hours of committee meetings each day just to put everything back together. Maybe there are some items that we were going to decide later, so we have to discuss those items. Maybe there are some items that were omitted and somebody wants to put back in. So, I mean, the deliberations on the budget can take some time. The other bill that we're going to be having, going to have to work on is the new transportation plan. For the state of Kansas. T-Works has kind of run its course, and so we have a new transportation plan that we already had a hearing on that in appropriations. We had something like 50 conferees when we had that bill. And so we're going to have to be looking at all the aspects of the transportation plan that was introduced and see if there's any alterations that we want to make in regards to the transportation plan, and then pass that on to the House for a full House deliberation. So those are some of the things that we're doing in the Appropriations Committee.
You know, it would seem to me, looking from the outside in, how many's on your committee?
23.
23 people. Okay, that's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
To orchestrate
and a lot of
everything.
ideas.
Yeah, I bet so. But this must be a year-round job. I mean, that things come to you and there's paperwork coming to you constantly.
Yes, it is. It is. Being chairman of appropriations is almost a full-time legislative job because when you're in session, obviously, I have meetings all day with interest groups, departments, agencies, secretaries, wanting to make sure that their funding is going to be maintained. And then when we're out of session, I'm also a member of the State Finance Council. So if there is any type of money that needs to be spent immediately, then those members, which is House and Senate leadership, the governor, and then my counterpart in the Senate, and then myself, and then we decide whether or not we're going to spend those dollars outside of the legislative session. I also served on the Transportation Task Force, the Industrial Hemp Advisory Committee, the Special Committee on Medicaid Expansion. So there's a lot of other committees that I served on throughout the entire year.
You need to see who's doing that assignment work, don't you?
Yeah, I know who's doing the assignment work, but it keeps me busy.
I bet it does. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. And in the middle between us is Troy Waymaster from Russell, Bunker Hill area. And you're the big cheese on the appropriations.
I'm the chairman of the Appropriations
Okay,
Committee.
that's a better term. And before we cut away to break, you were talking about, both of you were talking a little bit about the judiciary budget. Mm-hmm. And John, you previously served on that committee, if I remember right.
I was on appropriations when the speaker, our speaker, present speaker, was chairman of appropriations, and I chaired the judiciary. So I was privy to go in on a conference committee. But appropriations, I was on appropriations too, and it was.
I remember that.
It was one of the most difficult committees because you have all the smaller budget committees reporting in, and as chairman, and Troy's the chairman now. You know, putting that together, it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, making sure the right piece goes in the right hole. And
it's a craft.
And it is a craft. And you know, he has an office on the first floor, which is right adjacent to his meeting room, committee room. I mean, if we want to use it, we have to ask him.
Okay.
But you know, the appropriations chair probably is more involved than any other legislator other than the speaker. Because he's there, he's responsible for our budget, and if we don't have a budget, we don't get out of here. We get to stay forever.
Yeah.
So
we have to pass a budget.
So we have to pass the budget, and then he's got to be a good negotiator, because you're going to go over and negotiate with the Senate on their budget, and I know you're good at that. But talk about that process, about when we do a budget, how we meet with the Senate.
Well, how that process starts is each chamber, the House and the Senate, will pass their own versions of the budget. And so if there are any differences between the two budgets that are passed by the Senate and the House, then we have what's called a conference committee. And so the chairman, the vice chair, and then the ranking minority member of each chamber meet and we negotiate, as John mentioned, on the differences within our respective budgets. And you always want to try to hold your chamber's position, so I'm always trying to hold the House position of the budget that was passed out by the members of the House. But there are some times where there might have been something included in the Senate budget that we just didn't contemplate, and is actually a good move for the state of Kansas. And so we may not just totally accept their provision of that part of the budget, but we may negotiate that down and accept it. And the Senate will do the same thing with the House. We may have something that was included that they had never contemplated, and so they'll come back and negotiate that item as well. It's a very lengthy process. It takes weeks to actually get through every single difference. I think my first year we had 135 differences that we had to negotiate on. Last year that number was a little bit down. I think it was like 120 when we had our budgets passed out. But it's always interesting to see how different the two budgets are from the House and the Senate. And anything is, you hear about what's going on in the Capitol, but still there's that many differences in the budget.
And it takes place in public. You meet in a meeting room, the public of course is, and the press is there, and you sit across the table and you negotiate. And it's democracy in a true form. This is how things get done. But it is done in the public eye.
Yeah, it's not in the back room. You get to hear the
public.
rationale for each decision made.
And Troy, what's the total budget money? Did you handle?
The state general fund dollars is a little over $7 billion.
Right.
When you factor in all funds, so that'd be the state general fund, federal funds, fee funds, we're looking at a budget of more than $18 billion.
$18 billion?
For the state of Kansas, yes.
Wow.
Hard to believe, isn't
it? It is really hard to believe. That is a lot of money. I don't know, I guess, as I listen to you guys talk about this here, how difficult it would be. I guess you would, these are just guesses, but I'm guessing somebody comes in that regularly appears in front of you, and you know that that person is always very accurate on their figures. And you may have somebody else who comes in, has always inflated it, and you've got to go through those to try to sort it out, to keep it in some sort of order, because I suppose if you start handing the money out and you get down towards the end, so we have this many to go and we don't have enough money to do this.
Right. I mean, you do have to rely a lot on our research staff. They're the ones that if somebody comes in and said, well, it's going to cost this amount for this particular item, then we go back to research and like, okay, what is the actual cost? And they will give us an estimate and say, well, it's probably about this.
Is that your staff?
And that's our staff,
okay.
Yes, at the legislature. So we rely heavily on the research staff because they work there year round.
Right.
And so they know what is
going
on when we're
for
absent.
Years.
And they've been there for years.
Yeah, I mean, they've got, it's not unusual to have somebody that's there 20 years. And head of legislative service, I think, has been there 30.
Yeah, he's been there a long time.
Wow.
So I mean, so they have a breadth of knowledge that we need to use as a resort, because we're only a half a year legislature. I mean, we're a citizenship legislature, and they're there all year round, and they're going through everything. The other is the budget director, because they're the ones that generate the fiscal notes on how much something is going to cost when a bill is introduced, and so they go through and estimate how much a particular bill will cost the state of Kansas if it were to pass the legislature.
Right. Every bill that's introduced gets a statement with it what it may cost. It may change, of course, when you have amendments on the bill. But so Troy gets all of that and he puts the puzzle together.
Are those estimates coming from your staff then, where there's amendments to the bill? And then that changes the amount of the cost. Does that come from your staff putting that together, or the agency that is requesting the funding?
It could come from both. It just kind of depends on exactly what type of amendment it is. If we want to offer an amendment, staff has to write it up.
Right.
So they have to do the due diligence of making sure that there is a cost factor to it. We have an accurate number. Agencies can't bring amendments. They can bring it to a member, but the member has to go to the revisor's office and research in order to have the amendment brought forward in committee or on the floor of the House.
Drafted in form.
Yeah.
So, but you can always, as a chairman, you can go back to if you get a bill that's going to be amended, you can go back to the budget director and ask him to review that, and he'll give you a new statement of what it may cost.
Okay. Wow, it's tremendous. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. That's John on your far left on your screen. And in the middle is Troy Waymaster from the 109th District out of Bunker Hill, Russell area. He's a graduate of Russell High School, went to KU, and farm kid, and a lot of other things. Troy, first off, thank you so much
Well,
for
thank
coming
you for
here.
having me here, Doug.
I know it's a long trip from here to Bunker
too
Hill,
bad.
and that's a good drive anyway.
A little over an hour.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having
And John, thank you so much for coming in and bringing the information. We get it here, and it makes a lot more sense when you come in and share it, because I'm beginning to get a good understanding of it and how much work that goes into that. So thank you guys for years and years of service. Appreciate it.
All
Appreciate
right.
it
You're
greatly.
welcome.
We
Thank
will
you.
have a guest next week. I'm just not sure who.
That'd be great. We'll look
Okay.
forward to it.
Okay.
Thanks for watching. See you next week.